Good morning, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Applications Committee, the 31st of January 2024. This meeting has been live streamed and will be made available on the Council website for public viewing. Remote participants, please follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off your video when you're not addressing the meeting, writing speak in the Teams chat function when you want to contribute. If you're in the hall, you can do this on your iPhone or iPad. Please do not repeat contributions already made by other members. No material should be posted in the chat function if it's intended as part of the discussion. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting, please either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time or write leave in the Teams chat function and then join when you rejoin the meeting so we can keep track of whether the meeting is quorate. All members should speak clearly and directly into the microphone when making contributions, and when referring to reports, please provide reference to the relevant page and paragraph to allow everyone to follow. Please focus contributions on areas where clarification is required or to propose an alternative to a recommendation. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. And I now ask Tracy, our Governance Officer, to confirm the sediment and apologies, and I approve remote participation of members joining online.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, members. We've got 18 members present in total, 4 members present in person at Council HQ, being the Chair, the Vice Chair, Councillors McFarlane and Councillor Slater, and we've got 14 members present on Microsoft Teams. That's being Councillors Beretti, Blake, Campbell, Crothers, Dashper, Davies, Drysdale, Hill, Howie, Hislop, Jordan, Marshall, Thompson and Walters. And I've got one apology from Councillor Dryborough. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Tracy. Any declarations of interest, members? I have one declaration of interest. Councillor Drysdale.
Yeah, good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. It's with regards to item number 8. I don't want to declare an interest, but I'd just like members to be aware that I have a loose connection with the applicant, having met him socially very briefly a number of years ago at a couple of social functions. I can remember one of them, but I'm not sure where the other took place. I'd just like to also let the committee know that Mr. Petrucci did email me and ask me just for some further information, etc. I did reply back to him to say that I wasn't able to comment, as I would like to remain in the meeting and be part of the decision-making process, and I don't think there's a conflict of interest here of any sort. So I hope that's acceptable to yourself, Chair, and to yourself in governance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Drysdale. You're maybe just a bit premature, and Genta, of 3 items for you, no necessarily declarations of interest, but information. Item 8, agenda item 8 on our papers has been withdrawn by the applicant, therefore that will not be considered today. David has asked if we could take an additional agenda item which will appear agenda 10 in your papers. You all should have had received an electronic copy. I've already asked governance if they can put this agenda item 10, which Andrew and I have agreed to take, on the chat function. And if any members present have not yet had sight of that paper, we have hard copies there, and I would hold a 5-minute recess to allow members to consider the document prior to being in session if they don't already have had sight of it. So that's the new or additional item, agenda 10. And the only other matter for bringing to your attention is that governance have written to all chairs asking if they will use members and officers' titles, because it's difficult for members sometimes and members of the public to follow when we use first names, and it's something I'm particularly guilty of. So I will do my best to ensure that when you're addressed in future, it's with your title. Can we agree the minute of the previous meeting, 13th of December 2024, as a true record? Members in the hall have confirmed that's Okay. Tony Beretti has. So I take it that's a true record, members. Thank you. So, Governance Officer, you take us through the procedure for today, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The Planning Applications Committee will consider each application in turn as detailed on the agenda. The case officer or other appointed officer will make a short presentation addressing the determining issues, accompanied by digital images. Any late information, amendments or corrections will be reported at this time. Members may ask questions of officers following the presentation on points of clarification. The Chairman has been provided with a list of eligible representatives who have registered to speak at this meeting within the period specified in Council policy. No other persons will be allowed to speak. The Chairman will individually invite those who have registered in advance to speak to make their presentation, after which they may be questioned by committee members. No questions may be asked of members. The order of eligible parties being heard will be as follows: third parties objecting to an application, third parties supporting an application, statutory consultees objecting to an application, elected members of Dumfries and Galloway Council who are not members of the Planning Applications Committee, and such members should withdraw from the meeting after making their presentation, and then applicants or their agents. Representatives were offered the option of joining today's meeting in person via Microsoft Teams or to provide a written statement to be read out on their behalf. Presentations will be strictly limited to 3 minutes per person, except for national and major developments, which by their very nature are more complex, and the time limit will be 5 minutes. The Chairman of the committee will ask you to come to a conclusion if you take too long. Representatives are encouraged to use the time allotted to clarify any points they consider material and address the determining issues. Certain matters are not normally material planning considerations and will not be taken into account by the Council when deciding on a planning application. Representatives should not raise any new matters without explaining why they were not raised earlier with the case officer. Please do not repeat what is in the report, as members will have already read the report. After all representations have been heard, the committee is then in formal session, and no members of the public may address the committee from the public gallery. The Planning Applications Committee will then proceed to determine the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Tracy. We move on to agenda item number 4, an application for the installation of standby generator and diesel tank and erection of 3-metre high palisade fence, renewal planning permission previously granted under 20/1244/full at Kendoon Power Station, Castle Douglas. This is a full application, reference number 23/1429/full. Recommendation is to approve, and the case officer is Louise O'Reilly. Is it you that's taking us through this presentation today, David? So you just take us through your presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll be covering Louise's reports. Louise was a contractor who worked for us, but our contract's now finished. But there are a couple of our reports which are on the agenda. A couple of points just to make at the outset. As you'll have noticed in the description there, this is a renewal of an extant planning permission. So the permission is still valid from before. So the principle, if you like, has been well established of the development. Second, we do have the applicants here who I'm sure will be able to provide a lot more detail if required. But as I understand it, this is not at all related to the KTR scheme, the power line replacement from Kendoon to Tongland. This is instead part of a UK-wide electricity grid scheme called Black Start, whereby hydro and pumped storage schemes would be used to restart generation and grid services in the situation where the entire United Kingdom was offline power-wise. So really what this would be is a standby generator to operate the switches at the substation to divert power. So in theory, we would hope that this would never actually be operational. It's not something that's going to be running 24 hours a day. It is clearly a standby generator for this Black Start scheme only. So just running through some of the slides. Location plan to show you where it is. You can see that there are a number of residential properties running just to the south in that sort of circular area that you can see there. To the north of those houses is the existing transformer and substation. And then to the north of that, across an access road, is the application site in red. Just a context plan, it's lying some distance north of Dalry. And that zooms in a bit closer. And an aerial photo, just again, where you can see in the centre of the slide there is the transformer area and the application site. So you can see it is heavily wooded that is surrounding the area as it is. As noted in the report, some trees will have to be removed to facilitate this development, but it's on the plans as being about 16 trees in total. So the block plan showing you've got the two distinct elements within the 3 metre high palisade fence compound. You've got the standby generator and a diesel tank to power that in the event of it being required. Then you've got 4 elevations that just move around it, firstly from the southwest and to the northwest, to the northeast, and finally from the southeast. So you can see particularly in that one it is set against the background of the trees that are there. So this is opposite the site. It's marked here as power station, but obviously that's the transformer site related to the power station. And this is adjacent to it, lying to the east, so there already is that sort of fenced compound. This would replicate that over to the left-hand side. And just sort of panning round from that photo, it's looking up towards the power station. It's looking the other way, which is the access road to the houses. So the site is basically in the centre of the site. A little more distant shot, so again you can see it's a very well screened site. It's looking from the access road towards the power station, so the site here is just sort of in the centre to the left-hand side of the road. So as I say, it's a renewal of a previous permission. There were a number of objections, which is why it's before yourselves, but basically we're recommending the same approval as was granted last time round. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Mr. Sutty. Questions for our case officer? Members?
Councillor Beretti.
Oui.
Councillor Beretti.
Councillor Beretti, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Dempster. Quick one for David here. Can you confirm that this project actually had a trial run about 6 or 7 months ago on National Grid, and it was proven to be highly successful? And in part, it's because of the hydro setup that it has in Castle, in the area, and it would be a pivotal piece of infrastructure within the National Grid. And can you do that?
Mr. Sutty.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't aware of that. I'm sure the applicants will be able to confirm that in their presentation, but certainly that is my understanding as well, that this is a critical part of UK-wide infrastructure for the National Grid.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Beretti. Councillor Walters even, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask on page 23, the second condition, the recommended conditions concerning the archaeological works. Can I just ask why is that being suggested to be included if the council archaeologist doesn't seem to have any objections or doesn't seem to raise any concerns whatsoever? Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Walters. Mr. Sutty.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Whilst there's no objections to it, it is subject to a watching brief being in place. So I don't believe that there are any issues with carrying this out. Indeed, paragraph 4.6 gives a bit more detail on that the written submission has already been made for a scheme of investigation. So there's no objections to that. But following on from that, there's still the requirement for the actual watching brief to be reiterated.
Thanks, Councillor Walters. Councillor Slater.
Yes, Chair, it was about the generator not running much at all, so it wouldn't be affecting the people at all. And the trees also, our second question is, the trees that are being cut there, they mean forestry trees, not deciduous trees? Thank you.
It may be that the applicant will be able to help me more with that than Mr. Sutty, but Mr. Sutty, can you help David, or will leave that to the applicant to respond?
I think that would be probably best left to the applicant to confirm. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Slater. So you'll be able to speak to the applicants once they've made the presentation. I have Councillor Drysdale, please.
Thanks, Chair. It was just to ask David if that's okay. Page 20 on the objections. One of the objectors, or some or all of them, in fact, have said that the plans submitted are inaccurate. I take it that's been corrected, David, and the plans we are seeing through yourself are the correct plans. Thank you.
Mr. Sutty, please.
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor McFarlane.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a point of clarity on page 20, Council Environmental Health, no objections subject to conditions, but I can't find the conditions within the papers. Is that something you can assist me with?
Thanks, Councillor McFarlane. Mr. Sutty.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that's actually covered in the text of paragraph 4.7. Environmental health officers had raised an objection but had suggested a condition. That's just a sort of standard noise condition that they were looking at. But when we've looked at that, both with the previous application, which is extant, and the current one, we didn't consider that a standby generator that was going to actually, hopefully, never be used. It was actually necessary to attach such a condition, so it failed the test of Scottish Government Circular 4 1998 on the use of conditions. So we haven't followed that through either with the previous permission or with this current one. But as it carries on to say, if there is proven to be some statutory nuisance, there are powers under Environmental Health Act to actually deal with that anyway.
Thanks, Councillor McFarlane. If there are no speakers in the chamber, if there are no other speakers looking to ask our case officer any questions, we'll move to our first registered speakers we have with us today, Patrick Barber and Rachel Tipple, who are representing the applicant. You'd like to come forward, please? I'm sure you know the procedure anyway, but collectively you will have 3 minutes to make a presentation. I will remind you with 30 seconds to go to draw your presentation to a conclusion, and you know there will be one question set you, but I'd be grateful if you'd wait in case members have questions for you before you return to your seat. So just whenever you're ready, thank you very much.
Thank you and good morning. Hopefully I won't repeat too much of Mr. Sutty's presentation, but yeah, just to outline a couple of important points from our perspective. So as Mr. Sutty pointed out, this application is not a fresh application. We're only asking that existing consent be renewed. As a bit of background, the original consent was not carried out due to access issues with the landowner, which have now been concluded as of December, so no such delays should take place should the application be approved here. Again, as Mr. Sutty pointed out, but I'd like to reiterate, these works are not connected at all to the Kendun to Tongland reinforcement project, currently at public inquiry, nor are they related to any other major infrastructure being delivered by SPEN in the Dumfries and Galloway area. These works form part of a UK-wide Black Start programme, which is critical to improving the resilience of the grid by ensuring that power can be restored in the event of a total or partial shutdown of the electricity system. This is achieved by installing backup generators designed to automatically start if power to the substation is lost. I think this was touched on, but the specification is set out by National Grid, electricity system operator, and they've been installed, similar generators have been installed by SPEN across our licence area, as well as by SSEN and National Grid. And the project was first proposed in 2013 and the first of 77 generators commissioned by SPEN in 2016. Black Start proposals have also recently been approved by Dumfries and Galloway Council at Carsfad and Earlston power stations, identical to this. I won't cover the previous planning consent in the committee report, cover the proposal's compliance with all of the relevant policies, but as mentioned, there was a level of objection received, which is why we're at committee today. We pride ourselves at SPEN in having good relationships with stakeholders. We're aware that our work can have an impact on local communities. Unfortunately, which was an oversight on our part, the previous application was submitted without consultation with residents, though there's no statutory obligation to do so. That's something we normally would do. However, since the objections were received to the current application and the concerns highlighted, representatives from the SPEN project team and community liaison teams have met with the residents of Kendoon and responded in as much detail as possible to their concerns. You'll have read the objections already, but since discussions with the residents, alternative site locations were revisited, an updated ecology report was commissioned and undertaken, and additional information on noise and
You have 30 seconds to go.
various safety concerns was also provided. We're also committed to remaining engaged with the residents as the works progress through the construction period. And yes, we're open to any questions you have for us today as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You have two questions at least. Councillor Slater, you'd like to rehearse your earlier question, please, and our representatives today, I'm sure, will be able to help you.
Well, obviously, the earlier question was about lots of trees and also the noise from this generator. Also, I have to ask them as well as a question, what's the situation, how many times has that power supply actually failed that it actually needs a start-up generator to switch on the switches? So that's a question that, is that really needed? That's what I'm asking for. So maybe you could answer that, thank you.
I am sure it's no relevant how often the power's failed, because this is a measure put in place to protect the grid from a cyber attack. So it's about the future rather than failure in the past. But I'm sure the representatives will be able to answer your questions, Councillor Slater.
Yeah, if I can take your questions in reverse order. So yeah, you've kind of answered it. It's about future-proofing rather than reacting to something that's happened in the past. But the specifications set out by the National Grid Electricity System Operator, so it's an established method of ensuring resilience on the grid across the whole UK. It's not a Scottish Power or SPEN project. It's we take this on on their specification. In terms of the noise, so yeah, it's specified to run for 160 hours if there is a need for it to run. Apart from that, it would run for an hour a month, just to run through to ensure it's working basically. But apart from that, there would be no noise whatsoever. Trees, yes.
Trees, sorry. If you could maybe, are they deciduous trees or are they just forestry trees, like pine trees? What I'm saying here is deciduous trees are very important to our land, take years to grow. The forestry trees, I know they're grown for wood and use in buildings and whatever, but the deciduous trees take many years to grow.
Yeah.
So the area to be cleared is not commercial forestry. It's a mixture of flora, some of which is invasive species that will be removed as well. I think the plan shows 2, maybe 3 mature trees to be removed, and it's a mix of other immature trees and shrub.
The reason I asked that, there's a lot of trees cut down nowadays. People go around your door, say, cut your trees down and things like that, which I think is, some of that needs to be probably stopped, but that's a different matter. But yes, a lot of people do care about the trees being lost, especially if like oak and things like that, which could live 1,000 years. whereas the first tree, they're growing close together, so they grow very quickly. And there's nothing lives below the forest, I must admit, as you probably know that. There's just pine needles there. But that was the main reason for the question. Thank you very much.
And I think, David, well, at least I trust that the monthly 1 hour test will be during the daytime and not in the middle of the night, just to make sure that any disruption is limited to a time when it's acceptable that some noise should occur. And any replacing of trees would be a voluntary contribution, if you like, from the developer, because we cannot reasonably ask that, given that that condition wasn't in place in earlier permission. So any replacement of trees would be very much a voluntary contribution by the developer. But I presume, can you answer the 1 hour question thing?
Yeah, the 1 hour testing is within normal working hours. And just to add to that slightly, the design of the generator was revised very early stages in the project to make it containerised, again to reduce the noise level as well when it has been tested.
Thank you. Thank you. We have Councillor Campbell, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. You already raised the question, Chair, that I was going to raise is the monthly test. So if I'm content it's going to be during working hours. The only other thing was that I wasn't quite sure where you were coming from, whether we could condition that, although it wasn't conditioned in the previous application. But just is that something that we could look at?
I think we've had clarification, Councillor Campbell, that the test will normally be carried out through working hours. I don't know whether I'll ask Mr Sutty whether we can condition that or whether we can just accept the reassurance from the applicant's agent.
Thank you, Chair.
Given the previous extant permission, I wouldn't want to attach that as a condition, but I don't have a problem about putting on a directive requesting that such tests are only undertaken during normal working hours.
If members are content with that, I mean, it's quite clear that the applicant's saying that they won't disrupt people's lives anyway by running the machinery unnecessarily during the evening hours. But if members are happy with a directive, that would be fine, because it's certainly no enforceable by planning condition. Councillor McFarlane, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just following up on Councillor Slater's point in relation to the trees, we recently passed a notice of motion at full council in relation to tree protection orders, and I'm wondering if that would come into play and if that would influence this in any way.
I think I'll ask Mr Sutty to confirm, but I think at the moment we only place tree protection orders on individual trees that are of significant value rather than just general growth. But Mr Sutty, please.
Thank you, Chair. The discussion and agreement at full council was to look into the funding of a tree officer post, which is obviously something that will have to be considered as part of the budget setting exercise. But at the moment, there are no tree preservation orders on these trees. There's no form of protection on them.
Thank you. Councillor Beretti, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm not going to ask my original question, but one of the things I would like to know is if the generator wasn't put in to facilitate a black start from a grid outage, have you done a risk assessment of what the carbon cost would be to the country if we cannot get grid operational again in a certain amount of time?
I think that might be of interest, but I'm sure it's nothing to do with planning for an application today. But if these applicants can help you or agents can help you, that'd be fine.
I can't answer that question, but National Grid will have done studies into why these exactly are required and what would be the implications if there was a catastrophic event and then the power couldn't be brought back. But no, I can't answer that question directly, sorry.
Thank you. I'm sure that question can be set in another forum. Councillor Brett, are you content with that?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks, members. Any other questions for the applicant's agents? In that case, thank you very much for your presentation today. Members, we're in session. If there are no proposals, I presume we are content to agree and approve the application as set out. Oh, Councillor Campbell?
Yeah, I'm happy to go with the recommendation, but we did talk about a condition, so if that was attached, I'd be more than happy to support this. Thank you, Chair.
That's fine. Just clarification, Councillor Campbell, we are not placing a condition. That would be unreasonable. We're making a directive, but we already have reassurance from the applicant's agents that this test once a month will be carried out during working hours. Councillor Slater?
Yes, I would tend to agree with that.
Thank you very much.
Today. Thank you.
In that case, Clerk, Tracy, can you confirm the decision, please?
Yes, Chair. Members have agreed to approve the application subject to the conditions detailed in the report, with the addition of a directive being added to request that the testing be undertaken during normal working hours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Move on to agenda item number 5, an application for the erection of a general purpose agricultural storage building retrospective at Colrair Farm, Gatehouse of Fleet, Castle Douglas. Its full application reference 23/1715/full. Recommendation is to approve unconditionally. Case officer is Louise O'Reilly, and I see Louise with us. So will you take it? Oh, it's not, it's Louise, it's David that's with us. David, you take us through this presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as I said earlier, I'll cover all of Louise's items today. Members will note that we rarely see agricultural storage buildings coming forward to committee. The main reason for this is that in most instances, they're actually permitted development, don't require full grant of planning permission. There's fairly extensive permitted development rights for agricultural use. You can get up to 1,000 square metres as permitted development nowadays, with the exception of certain designated areas, one of which is a national scenic area where the footprint is reduced to 465 square metres. What you've got here is just 92, but the reason it's come in as an application is because the determination of prior approval system, which is where basically the applicant says, this is what I'm intending doing. We've got 28 days to say if it's okay or not. Normally, 99% of them will go through as being no problem, and they can just carry out the work. But the one exception is where it's retrospective. You do require a grant of planning permission where you've actually gone and done the work first. So that's why this is before yourselves. As I say, it is a rarity for such an application to come before committee. So in terms of location, you can see it lies several miles north of Gatehouse of Fleet, in a fairly remote rural area as well. So you've got a cluster of existing farmsteadings and dwellings in and around the area. So the shed itself is relatively small, open on the northeast elevation, closed on the other ones. Aerial photo to show the context, and zooming in a bit closer, you can see where the building is in relation to the other buildings as part of the steading. So green coloured, open on one elevation. Just panning around it, you can see it more in the context there of the setting. You can see there's some other agricultural buildings, both existing steadings and silos. And that's in the context, looking at the remaining farm buildings and the hillside which it's set against. A little bit further back, and then a more distant shot, just showing the context of it all together. So it is something that requires planning permission by virtue of it being a retrospective development, but for all the reasons set out in the report, we don't consider it as an unacceptable development in terms of its context or indeed the national scenic area. In terms of the use, it's clearly an agricultural use. I'm aware that some of the statements Tracy's about to read out query some of that, but basically in planning terms, it's an agricultural building on an agricultural area. We cannot get down into the details of the precise reasons or needs for it to be used. So for those reasons, it's recommended to be approved unconditionally.
Thank you, Mr. Sutty. Any questions for our case officer? Councillor Slater.
I read this report. It says here, retrospect. Are we sitting here today and this building's already built? And you could say it's wasted time in some ways. What I'm saying is the building actually already built, and it's now it's saying it's retrospective, so I assume it's been already built.
Mr. Sutty?
Yes, that's what retrospective means, because the photos showed it's already built, it's already there. It's because they've done that rather than go through the correct determination of prior approval route in advance of that it requires a grant of planning permission. So it's because it has 6 objections, it's had to come before the Planning Applications Committee. That is very rare, but it's not uncommon to get retrospective applications for agricultural buildings. It is rare to get ones with 6 objections. So really this is to formalise the situation. If members do not consider it as acceptable, then obviously you have the option of refusing and enforcing. But for the reasons set out in the report, we do not consider that that's a route we could support as officers.
Yes, just to be clear for Mr. Slater, if we refuse this application and move to enforcement, is there an appeals process for the applicant?
Yes, because it's a decision made by the Planning Applications Committee. It would have to go to the Scottish Ministers, where a reporter would be appointed and would consider any appeal.
So we have to be reasonable in any decision we make, but you have had your response from Mr. Sutty. Are you happy with that, Councillor Slater?
The building's built already, and we are asked to approve it. And I think that should be looked at. I do. I don't like to see that word retrospective.
We're not in session. This is simply questions for the case officer.
Okay. Well, I must admit, I think that we're sitting here discussing something that's already built, and the applicant is hoping to get it passed today, just like normal. So why would he build it first?
I think Mr. Sutty's tried to explain that had the applicant gone through due process, it would never have arrived here anyway. But because they made a mistake, process requires it to be here, and Mr. Sutty already explained that had due process taken place, it would have been approved and we would never have heard a thing about it, and that's what happens routinely, I believe, within the service. So it's simply a mistake by the applicant or the owner that has caused this situation, and the report's here to try and rectify that. But we can get back to that in session again if need be. Councillor McFarlane has asked to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just again, just clarifying, I think it's a typo, but in the conclusion it says application is recommended for approval subject to conditions, and then the recommended decision is approve unconditionally. So just to confirm that is a typo.
Can you sort that, Mr. Sutty?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor McFarlane, for pointing that out. Yes, I missed that one in the proofreading. It should be unconditionally in paragraph 4.8.
Okay, thanks, member. So, still questions for our case officer? If we have none, Clerk to the Planning Committee, Tracy, will read out 3 statements from objectors, and just usual 3 minutes, Tracy, and just whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. The first statement is from Helen Gray, objector. I would like to make the following points to support my objection to this retrospective application. Contravention of NSA regulations. The regulations for building in a national scenic area state that permission may be granted if a valid reason is given. I feel strongly that the applicant's reasons are spurious. Lag, Murrayton and Kilreach are no longer working farms. The estate has no sheep or farm equipment at Kilreach. The quality of the build. The building is unsightly unkept, oversized and out of keeping with the farms of Kilreach and Murrayton, which border the Fleet Valley, a recognised national scenic area, and it extends the reach of the development of farm buildings into the natural farmland. I believe this contravenes the regulations. It has already shown signs of disrepair, and since all the farm buildings of Murrayton Farms, which are Kilreach, Glag and Murrayton, are in extreme disrepair, it seems only a matter of time before this goes the same way. Suitable drainage and contaminated land. There is no drainage, water supply, power or lighting to this building, making it unfit for the purpose for which the applicant claims it has been constructed and is necessary. Nor has there been any attempt to install these in the full year it has now been in situ. I am very concerned that if the applicant's statement is true and the buildings will be used for overwintering, calving and lambing, all effluent will run straight down the hill onto our property, which neighbours the field. There is no other channel or provision for it. Accessibility and road safety. The applicant has refused to repair the access road, which is in the worst condition we have ever known it in 48 years, making it unlikely to be used for the safe transportation of livestock to and from this building. Last year, all lambing and calving took place in the steadings deemed unfit for purpose. The new building has stood empty and unused since its erection in January 2023. I fear that approval will show that it is possible to follow the law and regulations, and that the Fleet Valley and its scenic area will be in jeopardy from the precedent that this is setting. The second statement is from Peter Gray, objector. The Fleet Valley is in an area of outstanding natural beauty and its countryside protected by NSA regulations, by which the Planning Committee have a duty to be guided. Local residents are proud and protective of this important status, and the panel will be aware of this by the number of objections to the proposal by this absentee landowner. The overriding consensus from those who actually live here is that this proposal is not acceptable on the following grounds. The impact on the natural environment. The building is over-large, twice the size of the current steading to its rear. It is a second-hand, resited barn, ugly in its impact, being constructed of mismatched steel panels. It is not in keeping with the existing farm, which are low-lying and of traditional stone construction. Consequently, the building stands out against the previously unspoilt woods and burn running down the dune of Kilreach. The structure has also been built on previous animal meadowland, thereby introducing building creep onto what was previous virgin land. Approval would give a precedent for further repurpose of farmland to building land. Due to its positioning separate from the existing farm buildings, its impact on the area in general is all the greater. All these points increase the detriment of visual impact of the structure, which can be seen as far away as the B796 at Ruskell Castle. Despite having almost completed a full farming year of lambing and calving since its unauthorised erection, it has never once been used, neither is it expected to be used by the current tenant farmer. This is a fact. As the objections from those living there conclude, there is not a requirement for this building under the current need of the business, and granting approval would set a precedent for further similar or even less sympathetic structures, whether necessary or not. Drainage. The applicant claims the building would be used for an animal shelter over winter. There is no drainage to facilitate this, nor is there any concrete standing for such purpose. Effluent or slurry would be washed down the hill from the building onto the private track and down into neighbouring property. This is a real concern and is exactly what happened during construction when rainwater formed a stream down the gradient, through the farmyard and along the private shared lane. The danger of this being slurry needs to be addressed. In conclusion, the panel should not be granting planning approval of an application that evidence shows is neither needed by the farm business nor is a sympathetic blend into the natural environment as stipulated in the NSA guidance. And the last statement is from Richard and Josephine Scott, objectors. Regrettably, we cannot attend the committee meeting in person, and we would ask that the committee give consideration to this statement. Kilreach was once one of a number of farms within single ownership, Until recently, Kilreack has had a residential farmer responsible initially for Kilreack itself and subsequently for a group of farms known as Murrayton Farms, some of which was sold off over the years. The farmhouse at Kilreack is no longer occupied. Both the farmhouse and the outbuildings have become increasingly disused and dilapidated. The farmer has supported a considerable number of sheep and lambs. Some calving takes place, but cattle are by and largely pastured on the farm for usually short periods before being moved on. Against this background, it is a little difficult to see how the existence of this green metal shed could make any appreciable difference to the viability of the farm as such. Development proposals in rural areas should be suitably scaled, sited and designed to be in keeping with the character of the area. In this case, a national scenic area. In paragraph 4.7 of the report, the planning officer's findings, using words such as backdrop and palette, seem to suggest that this shed is something of a work of art, rather than what we say is an ugly intrusion into the scenic area of natural importance. We would respectfully suggest that members of the committee form their own view on this aspect of the matter. This may be the case where the committee should consider whether, in fairness to all concerned, they should make a site visit and see what there is to see, not just from the farmyard, but to consider the extent from different viewpoints, where visitors to the scenic area, walkers, campers, tourists and others are encouraged to go. Once it is recognised that the object is indeed intrusive and has a significant effect on the area, the merits of the planning application must be assessed in terms of MPF4. On that basis, we respectfully suggest that it cannot be reasonably said that the objectives of designation and the overall integrity of the area will not be compromised. Policy 4CI. And it would be absurd to claim that this shed, as it stands, is a source of social, environmental or economic benefit of national importance. Policy 4C2. For the reasons we suggest that the application should be refused, either now or later after a site visit, if the committee agrees that this should take place.
Thank you, Governance. And I'm sure members will take these observations into account when determining the application. So, we are in session, members. Councillor McFarlane.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just picking up on a couple of comments made in the objections there. Stated that it's not working farming. As we were reading through the papers, it says there was no evidence of farming taking place. Is that relevant in the circumstances, firstly? Also, there was a point of potential repurposing of the land having had this structure built. Is that an issue in planning? So the fact that we have this structure here, if we approve it, does that mean that there is an opportunity some way down the line for this land to be repurposed because it's no longer agricultural land? And do we have to prove a need for the building in order to approve it? Thank you.
Can you help, Councillor McFarlane, Mr. Sutty?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, all actually very helpful questions, I felt. Is it relevant about the comments? Well, in planning terms, it is an agricultural building on agricultural land, and that's, to tie it in with the third one, the need. We cannot reasonably consider the need. It's on agricultural land, therefore, if it's going to be used for agricultural purposes, then in planning terms, it's a conforming use. It's the sort of activity you would expect to see taking place on agricultural land. The repurposing of it, well, at the moment, it's if we can go back to the slides, it may be useful just to remind members what it looks like. It is an open-sided agricultural building. So at the moment, it couldn't be used for any other purpose reasonably than an agricultural purpose. It's not the sort of building that could be converted, and indeed, if people were looking for conversions, you've got a vacant farm building and steading buildings nearby that would be far more readily usable. So for all those reasons, I'm afraid I'm struggling to find any grounds to really refuse an agricultural building on agricultural land.
Thanks, Mr. Sutty. I think maybe trying to read between the lines, and I'm not putting words into Councillor McFarlane's mouth, but I think he may be concerned that could it subsequently become an application for a dwelling, given that it's now a brownfield site?
I wouldn't have thought so, simply because the surrounding land is still very much agricultural use. It's not one that would neatly fall within National Planning Framework Policy 17, for example.
Councillor McFarlane.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chair, and thank you, Mr Sutty, for the clarification. No, it's purely picking up on the points that the objectors have made, and it's so that we get some clarification on that and how valid perhaps some of their comments might have been. So thank you.
Thank you. So we're now in session. Councillor Barretti and then Councillor Walters.
Thank you, Chair. Just one point. When the slides were put up on the iPad, unfortunately, it's only a tiny portion of the screen that you can actually see. So I had difficulty seeing some of the slides. So I'm just wondering if Mr Sutty can put up on the whole screen some of those slides, in particular the layout.
Mr Sutty will attempt to do that, or one of our staff members will assist.
In the meantime, whilst they're doing that, Mr Chair, I picked up 2 points. I'm not going to go over Councillor McFarlane's points, but there was some discrepancy in the fact that one objector said there was some lambing had taken place. So that was something that I wasn't quite certain. Clearly, the building does look like an agricultural building. The other point was runoff. Now, would that be something that we could actually put in as a condition that the applicant make an attempt to channel whatever potential fluid that might eventually, if whatever agricultural intention there is, to make sure that it doesn't actually run off in a downward slope? And the other thing was, would it be possible, say for instance, to put some flora in part of the front of the structure, just to camouflage a little bit of the lines of the building if people feel that it is too quadrant, too square looking?
I don't think we would be in a position to change, because we are asked to approve the application as it's set out in the papers. Therefore, if we don't like it, the direction of travel would be a refusal, I would suggest. But I'll ask Mr Sutty to clarify that and the other points you have made, Councillor Barretti.
Thank you, Chair. Taking the second point first, it's obviously open to members if you wish to attach conditions about a landscaping scheme. It's uncommon for an agricultural shed to have a landscaping scheme, just because of what it is and where it is. You'll never totally screen it. In terms of the need issue that was referred to, whether it had or hadn't been used for lambing, certainly in my experience, I wouldn't say that farmers tend to put up buildings that they don't think they need, just because they cost money. It's obviously something they wouldn't be wanting to do unless they do need it. So operationally, we don't know how it has been used, and actually that's not a material planning consideration. In terms of runoff, control of pollution is normally dealt with by SEPA, so I wouldn't want to attach a planning condition which controls such matters that are looked after by another body.
That response satisfy you, Councillor Barretti?
I think it helps, but I still think that unfortunately, as you know, Chair, I have an eyesight problem, and I couldn't see fully the pictures as they were coming in, because literally they were only one fraction of my screen. But I do understand what Mr Sutty has said, and I think that is helpful. Thank you.
I am advised that there is a pin on your screen, or on your the view within your screen, that you can click on, and that enhances or enlarges the picture or the image that you have. If we can't manage that, I'll probably get governance to speak to you, and it will maybe sort it out for another time. It probably won't be able to do it today, though.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Bretty. Councillor Walters, please.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to the visual impact thing, the 4.7. Having seen the slides, I don't think you can argue that there is quite a negative visual impact. And I know we're talking agricultural buildings, but I can't really agree that because it's green, it fits in with the traditional steading of the farm. And to me, the objectors seem to have quite a strong case that it doesn't fit in at all. And if we are saying that it's actually in a national and regional scenic area, we could look at refusing it because it's not compatible with that, as far as I can tell. Now, I understand that it's agricultural land and all that. But when you see those, when you do see those slides, you can see exactly what the objectors are talking about.
Thanks, Councillor Walters. I know that Mr Sutty is aware of the National Scenic Area, and he did advise me that the size of the building had been reduced to fit with the requirements of agricultural buildings in a national setting. I'll ask Mr Sutty to help you, because I understand it, and I understand what members are saying about the size, scale and impact, but bear in mind that it would have been approved had it not been a retrospective one without coming to us, and that if we refuse this, the applicant may well go to Scottish Government. So we have to have very good reasons for refusal, and I'm certainly not trying to direct members. You are more than entitled to take whichever view you choose. But I'll ask Mr Sutty just maybe to deal with the points you raised, Councillor Walters.
Thank you, Chair. It's probably worth just reiterating what I said at the start, that even by being in a designated area, such as a national scenic area, it's permitted development for agricultural buildings to normally be erected up to 465 square metres, which is over 4 times the size of this building that's already there. So you would quite commonly find agricultural buildings being able to be erected in national scenic areas, and we could, as part of the determination of prior approval, notice that they have to put in, make comments about the colour. And I take on board what Councillor Walters says. Green actually isn't always the best colour to use in a natural setting. It might seem counterintuitive to say that, but if you get the wrong colour of green, it can make it more prominent. On balance, it's been considered here that it's not so visually offensive. It's not, day glow orange or something that's really, really stand out. It might not be the perfect tone of green, but it's not such to merit refusal. So I don't know if that's answered the queries, but obviously it's at members' decision here. If members feel very strongly that visually this is just not acceptable in a national scenic area, notwithstanding the advice I've given about the permitted development rights that normally exist, you can obviously refuse it on visual impact grounds and the adverse impact on national scenic area.
Thanks for that, Mr Sutty, and I think it's helpful as well to note that under the scheme of delegations, this application only came before us because we received 6 or more separate objections. So I have Councillor Carruthers followed by Councillor Slater.
Can I just come back on that, Chair?
Yes, of course, Councillor Walters.
Because my understanding is that we spend a lot of time saying we have to look at the matter in hand at the meeting. So I'm sort of surprised that we keep going back to the fact that it would have been permitted development, because that's, without being funny, that's neither here nor there, is it? We have the application in front of us now, and we should be considering that application as it is. Not sort of saying, oh, well, if they'd done something different, i.e. they waited, if they'd done something different, it would have been permitted anyway. I think we should be looking at it as it is on the page now, not going back and saying, this would have been permitted, this would have been permitted. And like the point I've made is about the impact on the landscape. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Walters. No, I think what Mr Sutty and I were trying to do was just set the context of what the normal system of dealing with this type of application would be. Neither Mr Sutty nor I are trying to influence members. Members are clearly concerned enough to engage in a lengthy discussion on this matter, and I'm sure members will determine it in the way that the majority of us see appropriate. I have Councillor Carruthers, Councillor Slater and Councillor Hislop, please. So it's Councillor Carruthers, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to put my view on the table, I think we either pause and go for the site visit if we've got too many concerns, or we should approve this, one or the other. I'm not moving a site visit. If that's felt by other members, then I would certainly support that, but otherwise I would move to approve if not. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Carruthers. If any member wants to propose a site visit, we should do it now to save time, because that will stop the process immediately, and we'll restart it if a site visit's approved. But I take your point that you'd be willing to attend if someone proposed it. And thanks for that, Councillor Carruthers. Councillor Slater?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The main concern with a lot of people here is not just the views of the place, it's the runoff. If you've got sheep in there, there will be excrement, and the lady said it runs down the hill towards her property. So is there any way of putting a condition in that they have to put something in to collect this waste? Because there's nothing, you don't really want waste running down the road in front of your house. You just don't want that. So that's really my question, really. Can they put something in to catch this waste if it was approved or not? Thank you.
I will ask Mr Sutty's advice, but again, I'd be reluctant to add conditions that may seem to be unreasonable, given that SEPA have the interest or the responsibility on this particular issue, but I'll ask Mr Sutty to help.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I already responded in response to Councillor Barretti's question about runoff that that's normally a matter for SEPA, so I wouldn't want to attach a condition which is covered by other legislative bodies.
Councillor Slater. Microphone.
That's it. I think that the people saying about runoff today, I think it deserves something, like I must admit. You can't just leave runoff run down the road at your property or something like that. How, I mean, I have to ask, would you like, if you like that, you wouldn't like that at all, would you? And I think it should be looked at, that part of it should certainly be looked at. Regarding the colour of it, the colour can be changed. That's probably the easiest part to do with using paint or something like that. But I think the runoff, that's something that the people have raised in their objections today, and I think that's something that should be looked at. The fact is also it's retrospective. I know Mr Sutty said that, but it's retrospective as well. And I don't like to see that in an application, I must admit. Because in other words, it's built, and we're just like talking about what the situation is, and we're being told really what to do with it. But I still think that there should be something done with runoff.
You have to be very clear, Councillor Slater. It's not our responsibility.
Yes, but can people go to SEPA now and say, when can SEPA come back and say they've got...
Well, they'll need to go to SEPA.
Okay, that's fine.
Or they'll need to go to the Roads Authority or the police, because they have responsibility for the road safety, and that includes waste from farms encroaching onto the road. I'm sure some members of this committee will be far more versed about that particular aspect of the law than I am, but our responsibility does not include the operational work for SEPA. Councillor Hislop, please.
Chair, it's an agricultural shed in an agricultural setting. The green that they've chosen isn't too garish. I would be happy to second Councillor Carruthers to approve this application.
Thank you. I thought Councillor Carruthers simply said he would be happy to support it. Councillor Carruthers, was that a motion you put forward?
You're absolutely right. What I said, it's subject to a site visit if that was appropriate, but if that's not the case, I'd be happy to move that formally. So if we don't go to a site visit, I'll just make that proposal now that I would move that formally to get it approved. Thank you, Chair.
Very kind of Councillor Carruthers. So Councillor Carruthers has made a motion to approve this application as set out in the papers. Councillor Hislop has seconded that proposal. We have one more registered speaker, and if there are no alternative views, then we'll make a determination at the appropriate juncture. Councillor Drysdale, please.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in. I just wanted to ask Mr. Sutty one question, and I think as a committee we need to be very aware of this, and I don't know if I'm correct on this one or not, but when we look at agricultural farmland and farms, often I'm visiting them for various reasons, you'll note that these three-sided buildings are often used for agricultural equipment because there's a lot of damage done to equipment, especially with the adverse weather conditions. So I don't know, the applicant's obviously not stated what, you know, the final intention of this would be, but if it was to remain three-sided, you could perhaps potentially look at that condition that it just was for equipment, but I don't know if that's something that could be conditioned or not. It's possibly not. So I would just take advice from David, but it's just something to think about when we make our final decision. Thanks, Chair.
I will ask Mr. Sutty to help, but we have to be careful, as always, that any condition we place has to be enforceable. And I don't think it would be reasonable to place a condition on a building where we would have to routinely visit to make sure it's being used for one agricultural purpose and no another. But Mr. Sutty is the very man to give advice on that element.
Thank you, Chair. Paragraph 4.4 on page 29 of your agenda does actually cover the agricultural proposed uses of it. Basically, in planning terms, if it's used for an agricultural purpose, it's an agricultural purpose. So it could be for sheltering of livestock, it could be for the storage of agricultural buildings, agricultural vehicles, it could be for hay store, anything like that. If it's all falling into the domain of being used for agricultural purposes, that's the same use.
And Councillor Drysdale's question was, can we make it very specific and place a condition that it should only be used for farm equipment?
No, I don't think that would be reasonable, to be honest.
Thank you. You can attempt that response, Councillor Drysdale.
I am, thanks, Chair. It just makes it more clear and probably leads to the fact that, you know, it possibly could be used for agricultural equipment or, as David says, grain or foodstuffs or hay. So it's just something to think about with regards to the runoff queries that other councillors have had. Thanks very much, David. Thanks.
Thank you. I think we've had a very healthy discussion on this, and it's clear that not all members are content, but we have a proposal to approve and a seconder. Are there any alternative views? In that case, the proposal has been approved. Clerk, can you confirm the decision of the committee, please?
Okay, Chair. Members have agreed to approve the application unconditionally. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Move on to agenda item number 6, an application for alterations and installation of external window bars and internal door grille at the Observatory, Rochelle Road, Dumfries. The application type is listed building consent, reference 23/1998/LBC, and the recommendation is to approve unconditionally. Our case officer who's with us is Toril Glendinning. So, Toril, will you take us through your presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this is an application before the councillors today, as it is a council application for listed building consent. And it's at the Observatory, which you can see circled in red on this plan. Here's a slightly more close-up view of the site, and the museum extension is to the south of the observatory, the circular building. The window is just on the south elevation. And here you can see this is basically the kind of, south elevation, the back of the museum, and this is the window in question. It's very easily accessible from the roof of that museum extension, which is why the proposal is to enhance the security measures of the window. And here you've got some more details of the proposed bars. They will be painted to match the existing colour of the window, which is green, and they'll be using non-ferrous fixings. And then we've got internally, they're proposing to put in retractable shutters. So this is the existing door and elevations internally. And then this is what is proposed. So down in the bottom left corner, you can see the shutters. These will only be in use at night time, and then they will be retracted during the day, so they're not visible, and they'll also be in a white colour to match the door. So we've got some photographs, not the best photographs because they've got the scaffolding up still, but basically this is the main facade, the north elevation, and that's the door we're looking at, but obviously we're looking internally. This is the side elevation, so the window is where that arrow is pointing. It's actually very difficult to see it from any public vantage points, just due to the museum extension. But that's the location. You can see it there on this is from Google Street View. But yeah, that is the window in question. And then from the other side, from the west elevation, you can kind of just about see the windowsill there. And this is a photograph of the internal door. So there will be a box frame basically in that recess, and that's where the retractable shutters will go in. So the application is recommended for approval, and there's also one point to note, and that is that there was one objection to the original proposal as it came in, and then since the publication of the committee documents, the objector has withdrawn their objection. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Torrell. Any questions from members for our case officer? Councillor McFarlane, please.
Yeah, thank you, Torrell, for that. Couple of questions. If we can look at the presentation of the west elevation. Yeah, just that one there. The window appears to be at the apex of the extension there, and yet there's another window just at the bottom of the roof there, which would appear to be equally accessible. And I'm wondering why, if this is necessary, we're looking at putting a grille on one, but perhaps not the other. And wondering what's actually caused us to bring this forward at this time. Because clearly it's an old building, it's been there for a while, the extension's not new. I'm wondering why it's become a security issue. Thanks.
Case Officer Torrell.
I'm just trying to see, I can't see from this image, it doesn't look like that already has bars. I know quite a few of the windows already have bars. Maybe just those two bottom ones. But I'm not sure, to be honest, why they brought it forward now. I think they've just done a survey of the building for insurance purposes to make sure it's up to scratch with safety standards. And that window and the main door is what they have identified. I don't think they've really gone into much more detail exactly why they haven't identified that window. And yeah, it doesn't look like it's got bars on it already, but okay.
If you're satisfied with that, Councillor McFarlane, Councillor Bretty, please. Councillor Bretty, then Councillor Slater.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just really as a point from Councillor McFarlane, is the building actually being used as a museum? And if so, how is it being used? Because obviously, as an observatory, it would have initially had telescopes.
Torrell.
Yes, I believe it's being used as a museum, and it's also part of the reason why they've chosen the bars they've chosen is because they still do use that window for astronomy purposes. Apparently the bottom sash slides all the way up into the wall, and they can do things to actually bring the equipment kind of outside. Also, I've just managed to zoom in, and that window that you asked about, it does have bars already, so that'll be why.
Just a follow-up, Chair, on that. Clearly, this is a historic building within Dumfries, and from an astronomical point of view, the equipment in there, if it is historical equipment, would be exceptionally expensive to replace, and on the market it would find buyers even if it was stolen. If it's modern equipment, it still needs to have protection. So this was my question as to whether or not it's actually being a working museum or an actual observatory.
Case Officer Glendinning, please.
Yeah, I believe it is still in use basically as both. I don't know about the equipment, which type of equipment there is, but yeah, I believe it's
Thanks,
in
Torla.
use.
If that's relevant to the planning application, Mr. Sutty, can you help?
Because it's an application purely for listed building consent, the only matter which the committee can actually consider is the effect on the character of the listed building by these alterations. So really it's the effect of the window bars going on the one window and the internal door grille. Is that going to have an unacceptable impact on the character of this Category A listed building? That's really the only thing you can look at, I'm afraid.
Thanks for that, David. Thanks for that, Councillor Barretti. I have Councillor Slater and then Councillor Hibby.
Thank you, Chair. Just what David said there will have an effect on the building, because you've got that round, beautiful round building there, and suddenly you've got to put, stuff on the side of it. I just wonder if that's what he's saying, putting bars and window, changing the door, I think, as well. So I quite agree with David there. That's something that should be looked at. Thank you.
Is there a question in there?
Well, the question is really, David, as he's concerned about the issues of it and the way it's going to be changed in that. So really, that's my question. Why should it be more sympathetically changed rather than what's to happen to it? Thank you.
Okay, it's Case Officer Glendinning that is dealing with this particular application. So can you help David? Councillor Slater.
Well, it's all set out in the report. It's obviously, they've chosen the kind of most sympathetic type of bars they could, as well as choosing the fixings that are the least damaging to the building. So it's really us having to weigh up ensuring that they have security to the building, because that also ensures its longevity. So it's a bit of a, yeah.
And I think, to be fair, the whole driver, Councillor Slater, is to make sure that the building is secure, safe, and our officers have considered this particular application being sympathetic in general terms to the building, and that's why they're recommending approval. Microphone.
Oh, I've turned it off. Is there going to be security cameras there? Because I think that's very important nowadays to have cameras.
Mr. Sutty.
Again, as has been reminded to me this morning, you've got to look at the application that's before you. So it's really just the effect of the bars going on the building, being an A-listed building, on one window and the exterior, given that, as Torral's already confirmed, you do have a number of windows that already have almost identical types of bars on them. So is that such an unacceptable effect on an A-listed building? Our conclusion is not, given the precedent of the ones already there, and as Torral's pointed out, how difficult it is to actually see that window. The interior, the effect on the character of the building is absolutely minimal. Whether or not there's CCTV cameras in there, that's not really what's before members today.
So thanks for that, David. It's been helpful in the discussion, general discussion. Councillor Howie, and then hopefully we can move on. Councillor Howie, please.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe a question for David, and it's regarding whether the advice of Police Scotland's Crime Prevention Officer was sought by the applicant prior to this application. But I believe, as David stated, that it's a Category A listed building that a secured by design solution probably would not fit in with that Category A classification, which would mean the only practical measure is what's proposed by the applicant with bars on the outside. But just if there's any information on that would be appreciated.
Is that for our case officer? You, David?
I'm unaware whether or not the applicant section did seek advice from police officers on the security side of things. But yes, Councillor Howie is absolutely right that if you were to look at how you could effectively secure the building, you'd probably be talking about solid roller shutter doors in every single window and on the exterior door, which has got to be balanced against the fact that you've got an A-listed building. So my view here is that they've done the bare minimum that they can do to make it safe and secure whilst protecting the character of the listed building.
Thanks for that, Councillor Howie. Are you playing with your button, David, or do you want back in? Councillor Slater, please. Mike.
Oh, sorry. Roller shutter doors, I don't believe. There's a lot of places in the town that got roller shutter doors. And just to kind of jump forward a wee bit, if you, I don't follow football very much, but if you go to Ibrox, all round about there, they've all got roller shutter doors, and it doesn't look good, I must admit. So I'm saying, hopefully they don't fit roller shutter doors.
I just wish sometimes we would stick to the agenda. There is no mention of roller shutter doors in the application before us. We're asked to determine this application as set out in the papers, and if members are content with that, then we will go with that. If no, if there's an alternative view, please put it forward. So at the moment, there are no proposals. If there are none at all, we'll just simply agree that it's an acceptable proposal and move with it. Councillor Campbell, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think we were still on questions to the case officer. I don't think we went into session, is that correct?
We're still on questions to the case officer, and Case Officer Glendinning is here, delighted to answer any question members have. I thought the questions were passed, which is why I was going to move to be in session, but thanks, Councillor Carruthers, for your note in the chat function. Torrell, do you have an answer for that?
I don't think there was a question.
Oh, I thought you were asking a question, Councillor Campbell.
No, I didn't have a question. I was just asking if we were actually in session or were we still, questions to the case officer. I'm happy if you want to go to session. I'm happy to go with that, Chair. Thank you.
I'd be delighted to get into session, and we're in session now, and if you've put forward a proposal to approve, that's absolutely great.
Yeah, I would approve that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I see Councillor Beretti indicated he'd want to speak.
Yes, I was going to try and get in there before Councillor Campbell, but I approve, and I think the measures have, as David Suttier said, are balanced given the necessity of the building and the nature of the building.
No, that's absolutely great that members have put forward the proposal and seconded. So if there are no alternative views, that will be the decision of the committee. Can you confirm the decision of the committee, please, Tracy?
Thanks, Chair. Members have agreed to approve the application unconditionally.
Thanks, Torrell. Thank you for that. Move on to agenda item number 7. Change of use and alterations to storage area at basement level to form flatted dwelling at 44 Galloway Street, Dumfries. This is the full application, reference number 23/0636/full. Members will note that the recommendation is to notify the Scottish Ministers of the Council's intention to grant planning permission subject to conditions, And our case officer is Joshua Scott. Joshua is with us in Microsoft Teams, so if you're available, Joshua, just take us through your presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Sutty. As has been said, this is brought to you this morning by virtue of the LPA's intention to recommend approval and notify Scottish ministers of such, despite receiving a statutory objection, specifically SEPA in this case, over flood risk concerns. Next slide, please. So here we have the location plan. The application site is located within the Dumfries settlement boundary, but it is just without the town centre boundary, being located across the River Nith by Buccleuch Street Bridge, if I said that correctly. The site is also within the Dumfries Conservation Area, and it forms part of Category C listed buildings 43 to 46 Galloway Street. Buccleuch Street Bridge is also Category B listed. There is an associated LBC application for this full application, which has been granted consent as well. Next slide, please. This is the block plan. It, again, is just showing you a closer view of those buildings and the location. Again, they're Category C listed. The bridge is Category B listed. But this also demonstrates the close proximity of the building to the River Nith as well. As you can see, the eastern wall forms part of the flood defence along the River Nith, hence the objection from SEPA. Next slide, please. These are the north elevations of the building. External alterations are few, but include alterations to the basement level window at the bottom left of the plan, and that would provide means of a fire escape and improved ventilation in the proposed flatted dwelling. The height of this window will also be reduced by virtue of an increased sill height, and that is done also to mitigate potential flood risk. Next slide, please. Here we have the eastern elevations as well. Likewise, the basement level windows are altered by virtue of an increased sill height, again to mitigate potential flood risk. The infill, so to speak, below the windows there in the dashed line, they will match the existing building when infilled. It is also worth noting at this point that the associated LVC has been granted consent for these alterations as well. They are considered to have no unacceptable impact on the character of the listed buildings, nor the setting of the conservation area by virtue of the small scale and nature of development. Next slide, please. Here we have our first set of photos. These are taken from the front of the building, which hopefully gives you an idea of where you are in Dumfries, but these will be unaltered. Next slide, please. And here we have the eastern view, which is probably best to see for considerations. You can see here the external wall featuring as part of the river wall and flood defence. And you can also see the two windows there that are proposed to be altered, although minimally. Next slide, please. So as stated before, this application is brought before you this morning by virtue of the LPA's intention to approve or recommend approval of this application despite receiving a statutory objection from SEPA. SEPA have objected over flood risk concerns by citing MPF Policy 22, which seeks to avoid development in flood risk areas. The use as a basement of this basement for a dwelling will increase vulnerability on site. However, the main issue that SEPA have cited is regarding the climate allowance, and the proposal does not meet the 1 in 200 year plus 53% climate change flood extent. As such, SEPA object based on this climate calculation, as the proposed floor level would not be considered high enough. However, we are minded to approve the proposal for a number of reasons. Planning history on site shows that the same application was approved in 2011 through application 11P30161. While national and local policy has changed since then, the proposal does remain compliant with policy, contributes towards the aims of the LDP by providing residential units in sustainable locations. And crucially here, while SEPA have objected, the Council's own flood risk management team have raised no objections, and neither have any other consultee. Further information was also submitted by the agent demonstrating that the site has never experienced any flooding issues and that the mitigating measures in place, such as the increased sill heights and floor level, will further mitigate this issue. And of course, should approval be agreed upon, that decision would then be put forward to the Scottish Ministers for a final decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joshua. Do any members have any questions for Joshua, our case officer? Councillor Hislop, please.
Could you advise what figures were used for modelling the flood situation in here? And does I think there's a live application for a bund on White Sands. Was that taken into account, and does that have any impact on the height of the flooding if it should occur?
Case Officer Joshua, can you respond to that, please?
I will try to respond. The levels that were considered by SEPA, they were all outlined within their consultation response. And I believe it said in there that there was no issue over current flooding levels, but specifically that it is the climate change prediction that they are concerned about. Regarding White Sands, I am unsure of that development. I'm not sure what bearing it would have on this proposal, but if Mr. Sutty would have anything to add to that, then by all means.
Yeah, that's fine, Joshua. Mr. Sutty, do you want to add to the response Joshua has made?
I don't have anything much more. I think really the key point is the fact that the Council's flood risk management team, who are obviously fully aware of the White Sands issues, are looking here at a 20% climate change uplift, which this policy would comply. SEPA here are now looking at 53%. It's quite an interesting case where if you go back to the 2011 application and the one before it, it's been a role reversal where SEPA had no objections first time round, and the initial objection actually came from the Council, who subsequently then withdrew their objection on a second application, and it was then approved. So you have that precedent. It's now SEPA this time round who are objecting, whereas they didn't object before. I think in this particular instance, I would be inclined to say that the Council's flood risk management team will have far more detailed information than SEPA in this regard, and if they've not objected to it, I think that probably tells you what you need to know.
Thanks for that, Councillor Hislop. Councillor Barretti.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to ask Joshua, just for clarity, now you said obviously it has never experienced flooding and the measure of raising the lintel, but did you also say that there had been modifications to the inner floor of that component of that area?
Yes, so the sill heights of the windows will be increased by virtue of the floor level being increased. And that was required within the 2011 application, which is when, and increasing those floor levels is what satisfied the flood risk management team to eventually remove their objection. So the same floor levels have been proposed now as were approved before. And again, as I say, it's still in accordance with policy, and the flood risk management team have not objected for the same reasons.
Yeah, those levels, are they substantial or are they minimal?
They are what are required for the flood risk management team to remove any objections and bring the basement dwelling in line with what they will consider acceptable. They are not substantial by any means. If you raise the floor heights too much, then obviously you would be losing out on a lot of head space, which would have its own amenity issues and living space issues. But again, as I say, they are increased in line with what was required and asked of by the flood risk management team.
Mr. Joshua, thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Barretti. Councillor Slater.
Thank you, Chair. It's regarding flood risk and flood numbers. The flood numbers are not correct because every time it floods, if it floods the car park, that's classed as a flood. So all these other, it's very, very rare for a flood to reach the properties. Now, it will reach, if it reaches the properties, at the moment in time it's cost, say, 40 million. So that's £1 million a property at this stage, and it'll go much higher than that. It's just an observation. But these figures you're getting is not exactly right, and SEPA don't have all the figures as well. They don't. Thank you.
Thank you for your helpful observation, Councillor Slater. If there are no other questions for Joshua, our case officer, we have a registered speaker, Mr. McCall. Mr. McCall, would you like to come forward, please? I'm sure you'll know the procedure well, Mr. McCall. 3 minutes to make a presentation. I'll remind you of 30 seconds to go. And if you'd be kind enough to wait in case members have questions for you, I'd be grateful. Just whenever you're ready, sir.
Thank you. Well, the only objection to this application is from SEPA, but it's interesting to note that it is only an objection in principle. And I think the reason they've done that is because their figures are based on predictions, and very high predictions in excess of what was produced by Michel in 2017, where they had predicted climate change of 20%, and now SEPA have gone to 53%. But it is only a prediction, and I think they're not very confident in that prediction on the basis that the objection is in principle only and not in a strong objection. They have accepted that at the 20% climate change, the water would not exceed the floor level in the property, and that's something that is very, very important. And they also accept that the sill levels will be well above the flood level at a level of 11.5, which is a substantial increase on the existing floor level. They also state that they're not very clear on this 53%, and I think that that is an important issue as far as this application is concerned. But the other point is, and they do accept that at the Galloway Street level, the ground level there at the only entrance door is 12.9, which is 2.3 metres above the predicted flood level that SEPA have said at 10.595. So these are the main points of the arguments. The other point would be that this property has never ever flooded as far as the owner and others are concerned, and the conversion also will provide further rented affordable accommodation, which is much needed in Dumfries and will add to the flats already in that block. I'm happy to go with the flood risk management team, as the chairman said, because I do feel that they've got more knowledge of how the river performs in different circumstances, and they should take precedence, in my opinion, over SEPA in this case. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. McCall. Thanks for being so concise. Are there any questions for Mr. McCall, the agent, today? In that case, Mr. McCall, thank you very much for coming forward. Members, we're in session. Councillor McFarlane has made a proposal to approve. Councillor Slater has seconded that. So if there are no other proposals, Clerk, can you confirm the decision of the committee, please?
Members have agreed to notify the Scottish Ministers of the Council's intention to grant planning permission subject to condition.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Agenda item, as members were made aware at the commencement of the meeting, has been withdrawn. Agenda item 9 is for noting only. The reporter has supported the council's view on this, and if no one has anything to say on that matter, we move on to agenda item number 10. Where's my paper, Tracy? We are asked. Oh, Councillor Hazlitt, please.
Chair, it's a point of clarification on item 10. As this has been brought back from a previous committee, is it only those members who sat on that committee that should take part because it's just changing, or is this a rehash of the whole thing?
It's a very good point, Councillor Hazlitt. In the last governance, I would think it would only be the members that were there the last time, because it's the same application. We've just been added to put an additional condition on. So I will ask governance to just confirm, first of all, that your view or your question is relevant, and that we should only be the members the last time, and if governance could confirm who they were, that would allow us to proceed accordingly. Thanks for that point, Councillor. That's really helpful.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, that is usually the normal practice, Chair. I don't believe there was any public speaking on this item. I'm just checking back at the minute. So, no, there was no public speaking on that item, Chair. If you give me a second, I can let you know which members can participate.
Thanks very much, Tracy. We'll just have a few seconds, a pause, and that will allow us to conclude the business for the day. So we'll have a 2-minute break just and then come straight back into session. Members, governance is now ready to confirm who was present last time and who can participate in the decision making. Again. Tracy, governance, please.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, members who were present for that item was the Chair, the Vice Chair, Councillors Blake, Crothers, Davis, Howie, Slater, Walters, Beretti, Campbell, Jordan, Thompson and Dashper. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much. So these members who were named are the people that can participate in determining this particular agenda item. It is a change of use, alterations and extension to public house and restaurant to form 2 dwelling houses, Class 9 at Grayson Bar and Restaurant Casfairn, and it's a request to consider an additional condition. Members, you have had ample time to consider the request. The condition that's asked us, we've been asked to agree, is contained within the papers, as is the recommendation. Are members happy to agree to this additional condition being placed on the application as set out? It's page 3 in the additional papers, and the recommendation is on page 4. So are members content to agree to add this condition to the permission that was subsequently granted for the property at Casfairn? Councillor Slater seems to be willing to agree, but if there are no views to the contrary, I will take it as a unanimous decision that members have agreed to concede to the request from Scottish Ministers to add this additional condition, and that will be a condition of the approved plan permission. Is that correct, Mr. Sutty?
We haven't actually had formal confirmation from the Scottish Ministers that they're not going to call the application in, but Toro, as case officer, has been having communications directly with the Scottish Government. They've basically queried if we would be willing to add that additional condition on page 4 of your paper to any planning permission which we'd be minded to grant. So I think the implication is if we attach to that condition, they would not call the application in, and it would be clear to the council to grant planning permission on that basis. But they haven't actually confirmed that yet.
I think that's helpful, though, David. If we can help the developer to proceed with their plans, get rid of another derelict building, I think it'd be to our benefit. So on the basis that Scottish ministers may still call this decision of ours in, as David says, it would be helpful or constructive if we were to add this to help support the developer in securing permission. Members are clear, and if Councillor Slater's proposal still stands and there are no alternative views, I will have our clerk confirm that it's a decision of this committee to add this condition to the permission granted. Tracy?
Thanks, Chair. So members are agreeing today to notify the Scottish ministers that we've got no objections to add that additional condition to the planning permission. And I'll read it out just for clarity. So it's condition 3, that no development in respect of this planning permission shall take place unless and until a scheme for property-specific flood resilience measures to be installed within the development has been submitted to and agreed in writing by the Council as planning authority. Neither dwelling house hereby granted planning permission shall be occupied or brought into use unless and until its respective measures have been implemented in full accordance with the approved scheme. Thereafter, the said flood resilience measures shall be maintained and retained in situ of the lifetime of the development.
Thanks very much, members, and thank you for your attendance and input today. It's been really constructive. I have no other business. Concludes the meeting for today. Thank you very much, members.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.